Hi, everybody. Vincent van Gogh is our artist of the week. He was born in 1853 in the Netherlands. He had a talent for drawing and painting from the time he was a child. And in his late teens and early 20s, he started training with artists at an art gallery. And they really liked his work. His parents had other plans for him. His parents wanted him to grow up to be a minister in a church, but Vincent didn't want to be a minister in a church. In fact, he didn't know what he wanted to do. He bounced from job to job to job until finally, at the age of 27, decided to become an artist. And a lot of his friends had taught him like basic rules about perspective, atmospheric perspective, rules of portraiture, things like that. But he really started honing his skills. And being an admirer of the Impressionist painters like Monet and Pierre Renoir, I think that he incorporated those kind of ideas into his work. You see a lot of very, very bright colors and very, very heavy brush strokes, brushes that were loaded with paint. And you can see all of the swirling in the treatment of the sky here in this one here. This is called Wheat Field and Cypresses, one of my favorites. His career only lasted 10 years, from the age of 27 to the age of 37. And he received no recognition for his art. And in fact, he had only sold one painting in his lifetime. People were not that wild about his work. They did not like the bright color. They did not like the heavy brush strokes because that was not popular at the time. But we look at it now and think of it as artistic genius. But, 160 years ago, that was not the case. 140 years ago, that was not the case. In his last few years, he had lived in Saint-Remy, and he was under the care of a doctor for various emotional problems. I know people back then had probably labeled him as crazy, but he was not crazy. He was just very sick. There is a difference. And it was causing him to make choices in his life that probably were not the best choices, choices that were detrimental and ruining his health. He died in 1890 at the age of 37. After he died, people realized just what a master he was in terms of color and composition and the sheer creation of his work. It's too bad he never received that adulation, that people loving his work. It's too bad that he never got to hear that in his lifetime. Maybe if he had had some people cheering for him, he might have made some better choices in his life because he actually maybe would have felt worthy of those things. What you're going to do today, we are going to make our own version of this painting here. This is called The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, and you can color this in with whatever you might have at home. If you have pastels, if you have marker, if you have crayon, it does colored pencils, it doesn't matter. We are going to work on this together, and hopefully you'll have a good time doing it. So this is a very basic type of picture. Now, I started off with my big piece of paper here, which is drawn on the whiteboard here. And I started off by making like 2 ground lines, okay? Because the world just doesn't exist on one line. It exists on many lines, many levels. So I made a wavy one here, and I made a wavy one here. It's best to draw things out first with pencil, so then you know what you're going to be coloring in, because it helps you plan everything. That's why artists do things like rough drafts and work in pencil, because it makes it so much easier when you're trying to figure out where you're going to place everything in your picture. So let me just move this aside for a wee bit. So let's put some type of moon up here in the sky, and we're going to put a crescent moon up there in the sky, and we're going to add some beautiful little stars. And we're not making them like 5-pointed stars that you would see like on the flag. the American flag, making just little circles because they actually look like little holes of light. If the dark night was a floor or a ceiling, and you could see like little tiny dots of light coming through it. So we're going to put that in there. And we're also going to make some big trees. So we're going to think of almost like a Christmas tree type of tree. And we're going to make these pretty big. We can erase a few lines as we go along. Now down here, we're going to put some houses and some buildings, because we're going to make our little village like we would have here in the Van Gogh picture. So we're going to put some little houses here, and you can add all the details and such later. Now I have one here, and I started it I did it in marker first, so it would show up well on a piece of paper. Because if I do it in pencil and show it to you video wise, it's hard for you to see. So this is the one that I had come up with that I thought was pretty interesting in terms of making it look like the Van Gogh, The Starry Night, which is probably one of the most famous paintings in the world, next to the Mona Lisa. Now, when you go to color this in, you can have a lot of fun with this, because depending on the material that you use, you can swirl your colors around. You can blend your colors if you are using chalk, like chalk pastel. If you were in my class, you would be using chalk pastel, which blends very nicely with your fingers. But if you're at home, feel free to use crayon. Feel free to use marker, colored pencil. Anything will work with this one. So you have the opportunity to be flexible in terms of the materials that you use. You don't have to run out and buy chalk pastels. You can use whatever you have at home, and I'm sure it'll turn out absolutely fantastic. So I hope you enjoyed learning about Vincent van Gogh and learning about The Starry Night, one of the most famous paintings in the world. And enjoy doing the lesson, and see you soon. Bye.